Great, so welcome to the videos on respiratory physiology, and I'm just going to start with the first video. We're going to get some idea of what the function of the lungs are, the function of the respiratory system, and by extent of that, finding out how their structure is designed to support that function. And I think these two starting points will help us get an idea, get a good solid base point for the rest of the videos on respiratory physiology. So let's get an idea of. We'll start with function. I think that's the most logical place to start when we're talking about an organ system. Now you probably have a good idea of some of the most obvious function of the lungs, and that is gas exchange. Exchange. This is the obvious one. This is what we all know about. So what is this really? What is gas exchange? Well, the human body, it requires oxygen for its metabolic processes, and it produces CO2 from those metabolic processes. So what the body wants to do is it wants to oxygenate the blood, so it wants to increase CO2. So oxygenate the blood, and it wants to remove carbon dioxide, so it wants to remove carbon dioxide. And this is what the lungs do. This is their prime purpose, is that of gas exchange, to increase the oxygen of the blood and remove the carbon dioxide of the blood. Fair enough, pretty straightforward. We knew that already, but we'll bear that in mind when we come to talk about the function, the structure as well. So what else does it do? Some of the things aren't anywhere near as important as gas exchange really, but it's also known to act as a reservoir of blood. So as we'll talk about when we talk about ideas of perfusion of the lungs, that there's can actually be quite a large amount of blood that's stored in the lungs, which can be important. It also acts as a filter of blood. This, for instance, it can filter small thrombi from out of the blood, prevents them from getting into the arterial system and causing strokes, from going to the brain. So that's again not quite as important, but good to know about. And one final one is that it does have metabolic activity. Let's have a listen. So when we think about, that's an M. So you might know about ACE inhibitors, for instance, the conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2, which is a potent vasoconstrictor, and that the metabolism of that is done by the angiotensin converting enzyme, which is situated in the lung. The other molecules it can be involved with, it can degrade bradykinin, serotonin, some prostaglandins, and I suppose it's obvious when you think about the lungs receive the entire blood supply of the body, and so they're pretty well situated to provide a metabolic function and metabolize products, and yet it's only a small function of the lungs when you compare, for instance, to the liver. And certainly all of these bottom three, they're nowhere near as important as the gas exchange, which is the main function of the lungs, and is what, in fact, pretty much all of the rest of the videos are going to talk about. So let's go into the structure now, and let's go and talk about how they achieve gas exchange. Really, we'll ignore the other three functions for a long time, but let's talk about the gas exchange now, and how the structure of the lungs actually work to optimize gas exchange. So what is gas exchange really? What is the lung trying to do? Well, let's look at it this way. Let's look at the gases we're actually interested in. It's only the two of them. It's oxygen and carbon dioxide. And let's think about the body and the air. So in the body, we're using up oxygen for metabolic processes, and so we've got low oxygen. Compare that to the air, where we've got oxygen of about 21%. We've got high oxygen. Okay. In the body, we've also got the opposite effect with carbon dioxide. We're producing carbon dioxide through the metabolic processes, so we've got high carbon dioxide, and you compare this to minimal carbon dioxide outside in the air we breathe in, so very low carbon dioxide there. So you can see these are the conditions that the body tends towards: low oxygen, high carbon dioxide, when it actually wants the opposite. It wants the air conditions. It wants high oxygen and low carbon dioxide to maximise its ability to undergo metabolic functions. So all it's wanted to do is try and get the body conditions as close as possible to the air conditions. So what it's trying to do, on a basic terms, is trying to optimise the diffusion gradient between the air and the body. It's trying to optimise the diffusion that's going to move the gases in the correct direction. It's going to diffuse the oxygen from outside the body into the body, and the carbon dioxide from inside the body to outside the body. It's trying to optimise those diffusion conditions, really. And so I think to help us understand that how the lungs are trying to optimise that, it's a good idea to have an equation in your head which talks about diffusion and the factors that affect diffusion. And you probably know some of these from basic biology, but the one that I like to use to highlight it is called Fick's law. Fick's law. And this talks about the factors that affect diffusion across a sheet, which sort of what it is here. I'll draw it for you. So the volume of a gas that's undergoing diffusion is proportional to first one, area. That's obvious. I'd hope it's pretty obvious to me. So the area of this sheet. The second one is that it's proportional to the pressure difference. So pressure 1 minus pressure 2. So that's basically the concentration difference, or the partial pressure difference. And the final one is that it's inversely proportional to, I could draw a straight line in that, I'm sure, is to the thickness of the membrane it's diffusion across. So we've got three different concepts, we've got three different parts to this equation, and what the lung is trying to do is optimise this figure here. It's trying to maximise the diffusion capacity, so that what we can get is as much oxygen into the body. We can maximise this diffusion gradient from air to the body, to the internal body conditions, and maximise this diffusion gradient from the high CO2 in the body to go to the low CO2 of the surrounding air. So it's trying to optimise the diffusion gradient and the ability for those gases to diffuse. And all it has to do is maximise these 3 points, really. And I think that's a really good way of understanding how the structure of the lungs is set up. We're going to talk about these principles more in later videos, but I'm just going to run through how the structure of the lungs is set up to maximise those functions. So let's talk about the first one, area. So area it's proportional. The rate of diffusion is proportional to area. So A there. So how do the lungs do that? Well, quite simply, they just maximise the surface area. It's pretty obvious, really. If you consider about the gas side of the lungs, you start with one trachea. You've got your trachea and you've got your mouth at the top. So let's draw that. Was a terrible mouth, but there we go. So that's a mouth, and we've got a trachea, and what we want to do is want to split these as much as possible, so that we can increase the surface area of the gas side. So as you probably know about from anatomy, these continue to split. They split. They form. You start with the trachea. You split. You form bronchi. They split and they form bronchioles, and they keep splitting, so they keep bifurcating, so it's bronchioles, and ultimately you get down to what we call terminal bronchioles, and this is after about 16 splits, so 16 divisions. I missed the bronchioles off there. You get terminal bronchioles. And at this stage, there's no gas exchange going on here. There's no gas exchange. This is the sort of the conducting part of the lungs, of the respiratory system. You start to develop the lung unit, which you'll almost certainly have heard of, which is the alveoli. And because we've split so many of these, we've split so many times, we've got a very large number of alveoli, and it's able to produce a large surface area. So from the gas side of things, we've got a large surface area by having lots of divisions of the airways to produce a large surface area, and quite simply the blood side of it, the circulation side of it, does exactly the same. You start with the right side of the starting the right side of the heart, the right pulmonary artery. So right pulmonary artery, and you divide. You have undergo multiple divisions, and what you end up is with a capillary bed. So you split and you split and you split, and you end up with a capillary bed. And this is often, all the textbooks compare it to basically a sheet of blood. Not individual blood vessels, but more like an actual sheet of blood that covers the alveoli. So if I give you a representation here, you've got an alveoli. So this is where all the gas is. So the gas is coming in here, and on the other side you've got basically a sheet of capillaries going over the outside of it. And as you can well appreciate, this is going to produce a huge surface area. So the structure of the lung, we can see how it's set up to optimize surface area very, very, very easily. And that's the first way that the structure is designed. It divides huge amounts. The airways divide huge amounts to produce alveoli, which have a large surface area, whilst the circulatory system leaves the right side of the heart and splits and splits and splits to form a capillary bed, a sheet of blood that covers the alveoli to produce a very large surface area. And that's the main pro point of how they achieve a good level of diffusion by maximising that surface area. We've got two other points to consider. The other one that has a large impact on diffusion and the diffusion gradient is the partial pressure difference, so the concentration difference between the one side of the membrane and the other. If we picture on one side of the membrane, I'll get my blood unit here, we've got the gas side, and we've got the I'll redraw this so it's a bit clearer. So this is a standard way of drawing it. So there we go. We've got the gas side of the membrane, and the other side we've got the blood side of the membrane. So this side we've got the blood, and this side we've got the gas, and we just want to maintain a high concentration difference between the two. And how do we do that? Very simple. We keep taking blood away and replacing it with new blood. Here we've got the blood here. It's got a low oxygen. We'll just consider oxygen for now. But at this end, it's got higher oxygen. So you keep replacing the blood with the blood that's got a low oxygen. Whereas you compare it on this side, it's the other way around. You've got a high oxygen and high oxygen comes in, and it's going to be oxygen depleted by the end. So all we want to do is keep replacing both the oxygen, both the gas that's inspired, and the blood that's on the other side of the membrane. And that's simply done by having an adequate perfusion of the capillaries and an adequate ventilation of the alveoli, and that's very straightforward as well. And the final thing to think about is that the thickness of the membrane here has a big impact on the diffusion gradient. And as you can appreciate here, there is a very small difference between a very small distance between the gas that's in the alveoli and the actual the red blood cells, the hemoglobin, for instance, that's in the capillaries, and that distance has been minimised to optimise the alveoli, to optimise the diffusion gradient and optimise the diffusion capabilities of the lung, to basically to optimise gas exchange. So that was a rather quick run through of the function of the lung. So we've got an idea of the main function is gas exchange to improve oxygenation of the blood and to remove CO2 from the blood. It's got a few other functions as well, and the the entire structure of the lungs is really set up to optimize this, to optimize this diffusion gradient that occurs. The body has low oxygen and high CO2, but it wants the conditions of the air outside it. It wants a high oxygen and a low CO2. And so to optimize that, so to really get the most out of it, it has to optimize the different parts of Fick's law. And so it increases its surface area as much as possible. It minimizes, it maximizes the difference in the partial pressures and the concentrations of those gases, and it minimizes the thickness between the two. And hopefully you've got an idea of how the lungs do that, and we'll talk a bit more about gas exchange in the next few videos.